Hi everyone, this is about to start. Thank you for showing up. So in-person meetups are finally back. Thanks to Postman, Joy especially for giving us this beautiful space to the community to hang out and discuss APIs finally in person. So we have a lineup ready of two very interesting talks. We got a developer experience. There are some folks joining on our live stream as well. So if you can hear us, if you don't hear us correctly, just drop a message and we'll figure something out. For our first talk is by Adeel. Adeel and I go way back. I know him from more than a decade ago when he was doing his PhD in APIs back from University of Auckland, New Zealand. And in fact, it was his PhD thesis that basically became API-matic, and now there's a developer experience platform coming out of a research thesis. So without further ado, Adeel, please come in and tell us about APIs.
All right. Thank you very much everyone for coming today, joining us today. Special thanks to Postman, Joyce, to you, because we were trying to get a space to host this meetup, but everything was like so difficult to arrange in this era. And so special thanks for opening up this beautiful space for us. Okay. So thanks again for the introduction. What defines the success criteria of your API? So this topic first came in my mind when I visited a bank in Europe a few years ago. So they had launched an API portal I think 2 or 3 months ago, and I was meeting the team who launched the portal. And I asked the question, how many developers are using your API? And the answer was an awkward silence. And I said, okay, if it is like less than 1,000 developers, it's fine, it's new. And they said, yeah, it's less than 1,000 developers, it's still ramping up. And when I came back, and I tried that portal by myself, I tried to use the API. After spending half of the day, I could not make my first API call. All the security hops, all the certifications was so difficult to tackle with. And it made me think that this team does not have the KPI of getting developers. Their task was to release the API. What if after a year, their bosses ask about the ROI? If you have invested so much amount in building this API, releasing it, how many people are using it? What's the ROI? And that made me think, there should be a success criteria which developers or the team who are designing API, building it, they should be thinking about while they're releasing it. So that will never work. Anybody knows here about this title? Yeah. So that's okay. What reminds you of this red box? Netflix. Yeah, exactly. So this is the title of a book by the founder and first CEO of Netflix, Mark Rudolph. And it's a very interesting story how Netflix, first began. But the more interesting I found is the concept of the chapters which are in the book. They are focused around the launch of their first launch. For example, chapter 1, January 1997, 15 months before launch. Chapter 2, spring 97, 1 year before launch. And there are more chapters like 6 months before launch, 1 day before launch, on the launch day, and what happens after the launch. Why I found it so interesting? Because it reminded me of my first launch. Like the build-up, the excitement, the anticipation, the expectation with my first launch. And I am sure that you can also realize the same thing, the same excitement. And this happens with every launch. Whenever I release a new version of the API, so I'm sure you also think how many people are coming to it. Is the press set? Everything is set. So imagine I release my API. What happens in the first hour? What I'll be thinking about? What happens on the first day? Imagine you have released an API. What will you be thinking about at the end of the day one? What will you be anticipating? Anyone?
Still working. Still working.
It's still working? Yeah, it's still not broken. We were basically thinking about the signups. How many people have joined me? Who are the people using my API at the end of the first day? And the second day and the third day, imagine after 1 week. The first week, now signups are there, the focus is there, but the next focus goes on. Okay, people are coming up, they're using my API, but how are they using it? What kind of apps they are building? Where are they integrating my API? So, and this is true for not only API, but for any product. For example, I had a big obsession about our signups, and day and night I used to use a tool, Mixpanel. Mixpanel is one of my favorite tools because every single sign up, every single interaction. So my obsession was about the failures. Anybody is having any failure, I was there to just see and check. Okay. So now, if there are these two criteria, for example, who are using my API? Of course, those are developers. And how and where are they using it? That we term as integrations. So if we start measuring those, then at some point of time, we would be able to see the success of our API. So when I was building this graph, another criteria, another factor came in my mind as revenue. Okay, if my API is doing good, how much revenue is it bringing? But revenue is actually an outcome of growth. So if you are hitting your growth target, then of course you are building something great, and of course revenue will follow. So now let's move back and focus on the first audience, who are developers. Developers are our target audience here. So I'm going to show you a very interesting infogram. Developers, who will think they are? A nerd that's sitting in front of a laptop just doing coding day and night. But who they actually are. So the point is, while we consider developers important and everything, we miss the diversity, the beautiful diversity in terms of languages we have among the developer communities. And if you want your API to be successful with developer communities, we need to think about the needs and requirements of those communities. How are they going to use my API when they are looking at an IDE in front of them? How can I help them? But interesting fact is that with the advent of no-code and low-code platforms and tools like Zapier and Eft, the API audience has moved beyond the traditional developers. Now, as a product manager, as a marketing person, I can also interact with APIs. For example, if I have published content and somebody tweets about it, I get a Slack message. So APIs are being called, but I'm not a developer. I'm in marketing who's getting benefit from this API interaction. So that takes us to an interesting fact that beyond developers, there are people who are consuming your APIs. And what are those people? So this is a diagram which I modified from an article, which is, the link is here, the business case for developer experience, written by Keith Casey, who is an advisor and a good friend. So I modified this and compressed it to four parts, 4 layers of our audience. On top, there are 10x developers, who are super developers, who think differently. There are not a lot in the world, very few, but they see everything differently. Then there are mainstream developers, developers that we see every day who are proficient in few languages, who are trying to connect different software systems together. Then there are framework developers, and there are people with little or no development skills. Okay, so what are their use cases? The 10x developers and mainstream developers, they have the whole API at their disposal. They can take different use cases, build around different apps using the API. There's no limitation on what they want to do with the API. If you come down to framework developers are, they are more familiar with their particular framework. For example, if I am working in React, I am more happy to use React components. I don't go big in some big language programming concepts or just particular language, but if you provide me something as a React component, I am happy to paste into my React application. So the point here is the use case. If you have an API, so for the mainstream developers, the whole API is available, but for the later layers, the use cases are limited. Framework developers, for example, if I am providing, for example, a payment capability in my WordPress website, I will be only using 2 endpoints maybe, which is helping with the payment, or a React component, which is helping with the payment. And if I come down, for the people who have little or no development skills, I can simply be using maybe 1 endpoint, just a trigger. So to make them successful, what components do they need? For 10x developers, they are self-sufficient. They have their own framework, they have their own libraries. So if you provide API reference docs, that's enough for them. They are good with it. And if you come down to mainstream developers who are, who are working with so many softwares, they don't have a particular choice of a framework or a favorite library. All they're looking forward to, if you can provide, for example, your API encapsulated as a library in a language they like to code in, they are much more happy to consume that and build an app using that library. So SDKs and code samples are the components if you want to target those mainstream developers. Then the framework developers, as I discussed earlier, plugins and widgets. Provide to them and they will be quickly up and running with your API. And for the last layer, low-code and no-code components and triggers. If you have Zapier Zap, just give it to them. They will be using your API using those. Now, providing the components to developers, that's one thing. The real problems comes up when you try to maintain everything. For example, you have updated your API and your components are outdated. Your plugin does not match with your API which is implemented. What happens then? So I've also added a layer of maintainability. So if you look at over here, the API reference docs, they can be generated via API specification. It's a no-brainer nowadays. It's very easy to do it. And you come down, you can see SDKs and code samples. They can also be generated via API specification. It's a different topic that how difficult are these to generate those SDKs and to maintain them. But if you have figured out that bit, you can easily generate those via API spec. Come down for framework devs. Now, since they are representing a few small use cases, then you have to manually make those components. Just take your whole API and pick up a few use cases, add some business logic, and then make this component. Similarly, no-code, low-code connectors, if you're working on those, you have to manually create those. So this has, presented a very interesting opportunity. I was reading an article that Zapier, the 5 billion unbundling opportunity. And just read this. The increase of underserved Zapier customers presents an opportunity. That means manually creating those interactions, those zaps, those plugins is becoming so hard that it's not maintainable, and there are more players coming up to solve this problem. So I just wanted to show the impact of this thing. Now, imagine as an API owner, what you want to do. If you want to target all these 4 layers, what are your options? So I can give you a suggestion. For example, you can start with API reference and docs. You can get it from an API specification. And if you can provide SDKs and code samples, then you would be able to cover the big developer community who are looking to integrate your API to their applications. Now, coming to here, what if I want to use these help framework devs and other ones? For them, if you have figured out SDKs and code samples, then your API is in the position to speak these languages, and these widgets, these low-code, no-code components are language specific. They are not language agnostic. So with the help of these SDKs and code samples, you can reduce the time of manual development, and somehow you can build those semi-automatically. So if you are able to figure out, again, API reference top, SDK code samples, you have a way to semi-automatically provide those smaller components, but again, there is no solution at the moment to automatically generate these kind of components, since it requires business logic and they are very use case specific. So enough for developers. Now, let's move towards integration. And that's about how and where is your API used. So imagine 20 years ago, whenever a business, we said that for a successful business, you need to have a website. Okay? Now we say for a successful business, you need to have an application, because my consumers are using smartwatches, they are using different platforms. So the problem is, we as businesses want to support all these platforms which our consumers use. And APIs address this diversity beautifully by helping create ones and apply to all the platforms who are going to consume those APIs. So the scenario is this. We have over 50 million developers in the world, and your API is trying to help those developers to build applications for different platforms. So how can we start? Let's start with small. Imagine, let's start with only 1 million developers. While I was making this slide, I was thinking about the 20 million developers, which are, which Postman right now has at their platform. 20 million, that's an insane number. That's crazy. So kudos to Postman for having this big community. Imagine, we want to support as a success KPI only 1 million developers in the entire lifetime of our API. How we are going to do it? So we want to just dig a bit deeper and see the total development effort required for the integrations. So over there you can see there are 3 types of development efforts required if you are working with APIs. The first one is the API development itself, which as an API owner is the responsibility of your team. On the left, you can see app development, which is the business logic, which is the design of your application. And at the bottom, you can see the integration logic. Integration logic, what it does, it just connects your API with the application. It does not add any intelligence, but it's basically the communication layer between the 2 layers. So if we go in detail, what does this integration look like? So imagine this little pirate is the one who is writing integration code for my API. So starting with an API reference, there is a still long path to cover. The configurations need to be taken care of. There are call arguments, authentication bit is there, especially if you're dealing with banking or fintech APIs. This is a huge bit to cover. And then checks and validation, encode, input, and the big list. Now, every developer who is trying to consume your API will have to go through all these hops. And if this little pirate takes 1 week to integrate, to follow all these steps, what was our target? To reach out to? A million developers. 1 million developers to start small with. So if one developer is taking 1 week, then a million developer would take a million weeks. Almost 19,178 years. Isn't this number crazy? So, and this integration sometimes is not, this code can be taken care of. And while I was working on this, I was thinking that who is basically making money with this integration code? Because the API owner is not making any money with this. Because they are so focused on building their API. The app developers, integration is not their goal. Their goal is to build an application. So who is making this money? So we talk to a lot of enterprises, and we often ask this question that, okay, you want to integrate this API, how are you going to do it? And the typical answer is third-party software vendors. And if I want to, for example, integrate Boku API, and I'm a bank, What I will do, I'll simply go to a third-party software vendor and ask them, okay, integrate this API. And how long does it take? It typically 6 months, sometimes 1 year, and the cost is never under 6 figures. So this kind of integration is a problem for the ecosystem. And now you can imagine how busy are developers, how expensive they are getting every day, because there is a lot of work they are doing. So as a solution, the unicorns of API space, I'm sure you all know Twilio, you all know Stripe. But if you know Algolia and Contentful, they're also new unicorns of the API space. How they have tackled this problem of integration? How are they saving time and of developers and increasing those integrations? I wanted to have a look. So I went to the portal of Contentful and I found a list of platforms which hold all client libraries, tutorials, demos, sample applications. You can see a list of languages they are supporting. Similarly, I went to Algolia. Algolia got a list of platforms and languages, but look at this. It says that we strongly recommend using our official API clients, libraries, and integrations. Why? Because with the experience, they exactly know that if you are following those integration code which is already built in, the user will be able to save a lot of time and effort. So in summary, what they have done, they are doing two things here. Number one, they are speaking the language of their developers. And number two, they are providing pre-built integration code so that they don't have to just do all the dirty work, and the integration code will speed up their app development. So by doing so, what they are doing, they are just like straightening up the path from API reference to the first hello world. It saves a lot of time, it saves a lot of effort. And the impact, I want to share a statistics from one of our customers, Brightly. I don't know why it's playing up. Yeah. So Brightly, which was commonly, which was previously known as your solution, we asked like how much time you're saving with the help of client libraries. And the stat they gave me were insane. They said that we used to take 1 week to release our new version after every update, but now that 1 week has been reduced to 18 seconds. So all the integration time which was manually done has been reduced, it will compress so much. So we wanted to run the same experiment with other companies. So recently we saw that Forbes released a list of Cloud 100 companies, and I saw a great article by Postman as well. So we wanted to analyze how those companies are doing it. So the work is still in progress, it's not complete yet, but these are our initial findings, that the companies who have made to the Forbes 100 cloud companies, they are taking care of both the things which you mentioned. They are providing components that makes integration easier. For example, SDKs, dev outreach, API reference, client out, all the things are there. And the number of languages they are supporting. And you can see Plate, Stripe, Intercom, all the good companies with massive developer traction are there in the top quadrant. So, time for some conclusions. So we started with measuring or defining a success criteria for API. And what we figured out, there are two main factors to look at. Number one, who are the developers who are trying to use my API? And number two, how and where they are using it. And what we found, that the companies who are achieving this growth, they are doing two things. Number one is speaking their developers' language, and number two, providing pre-built code for integration. So if you are thinking about the success criteria of your API, maybe it's something else. Maybe it's not in terms of developers or integration, but these two have proven successful for a lot of companies. So please consider these two factors when you are thinking about an API strategy. That's all from my side. Thank you very much.
All right. So if there are any questions, please. Yeah. Are there any questions from the audience?
You can take questions right now or after Sugam's talk.
Maybe we can do that too. So, yeah.